In the city of Chicago, some legacies aren't built on concrete. They're forged in gunfire and passed down through the bloodline. From the early 90s to the present day, the sets of the South Side have been locked in a war where the names change, but the zip codes stay the same. For the members of 8 Trey, the cost of repping the star has been paid in full, from veterans executed on their own doorsteps to young soldiers lost before they could even cast a vote. We've seen fathers and sons meet the same grim fate at the exact same age, and brothers taken out in the very alleys they used to play in. As the cycle of retaliation continues to spin through Auburn, Gresham, and Englewood, the list of the fallen only grows longer. From the legendary names of the past to the fresh faces on today's murals. This is a story of loyalty, the backdoor traps that never sleep, and a set that remains standing even as its foundation is written in the names of the dead. This is 8 Trey, The Price of the Streets, October 12th, 1993, West Lawn, Chicago. The morning was supposed to be a routine investigation, but it ended in a hail of gunfire and a case of mistaken identity that would haunt a family for generations. Around 9:30 a.m. on the 6200 block of Southwestern Avenue, 21-year-old Christopher Keys, known as Lupia Lupe, repping 8 Trey, stepped into his gray Chevrolet Celebrity, unaware that he was being watched. 2 Wentworth area detectives staked out on a tip regarding a burglary, closed in on the vehicle. What happened next remains a point of bitter contention. Authorities claimed that as detectives approached and identified themselves, Lupe accelerated toward them, striking an officer and pinning him beneath the car. In the chaos, both detectives unleashed a barrage of shots through the windshield, striking Lupe multiple times in the chest. He was pronounced dead shortly after, the victim of a tragic error. Police later admitted Lupe was never the man they were actually looking for. While the department defended the use of force, claiming the vehicle became a weapon, Lupe's family accused the city of a cover-up, stating the car had barely moved from the curb. In a chilling twist of fate, Lupe's son, Chief Beefy, would meet the same violent end 22 years later, repping the same set and losing his life at the exact same age of 21. One morning on Western Avenue left a set in mourning and a bloodline cursed by the very streets they called home. May 16, 2013, Auburn, Gresham, Chicago. The night air on the 8600 block of South Ashland Avenue was shattered by a sudden and violent ambush just before 9 p.m. 15-year-old Marquis Thompson, known as Marquis, repping 8 Trey, was walking down the street when he was confronted by a 3-man hit squad. The trio approached with lethal intent, unleashing a barrage of gunfire that caught the teenager in the head. Marquis was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but the injuries were too severe for the young teen to overcome. He was pronounced dead shortly after. Just 1 year removed from his 8th grade graduation, Marquis' life was cut short in the heart of Smashville territory. The shooters managed to flee the scene on foot, disappearing into the west side streets before police could converge on the area. No arrests were made, and area South detectives are left to investigate the loss of a 15-year-old whose future was erased in a hail of bullets. April 24th, 2014, Auburn, Gresham, Chicago. The early evening routine on the 900 block of West 83rd Street was violently interrupted at 6:26 p.m. 22-year-old Darius Kelly, known as Gucci or WAP, repping 8 Trey, was on the block when a van cut through the street with lethal intent. As the vehicle pulled alongside him, multiple gunmen inside unleashed a heavy barrage of gunfire in a coordinated drive-by attack. Gucci was struck several times and collapsed on the pavement as the van sped away, disappearing into the Auburn Gresham streets. The response was rapid, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead at the scene at 6:50 p.m. An autopsy later confirmed that he succumbed to multiple gunshot wounds, marking another targeted execution in a neighborhood gripped by constant friction. No one has been charged, and the shooters remain in the wind as area South detectives continue to search for the vehicle involved. June 1st, 2014, South Chicago. The night was winding down on the 2600 block of East 83rd Street when the silence was shattered by a targeted execution. Around 10:15 p.m., 33-year-old D'Angelo Russell, known to the streets as Alaski, repping Quet Gang, 358 Gang, and 8 Trey, was walking with a friend when the shadows came to life. At least one gunman approached on foot, closing the distance before unleashing a flurry of rounds. Alaski was struck multiple times in the thigh, leg, and arm, collapsing as the shooter vanished into the darkness. He was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but he later succumbed to his injuries, while his friend miraculously escaped the gunfire without a scratch. Alaski became another name on a growing list of fallen soldiers. The gunman fled the scene undetected, and no one is in custody, as Area South detectives continue to search for answers in the South Chicago night. August 24, 2014, Auburn, Gresham, Chicago. The early morning energy at a lounge on the 8300 block of South Halstead Street turned into a scene of absolute carnage at 2:35 a.m. A massive crowd of nearly 300 people were inside and outside the venue when a light-colored vehicle slowed down and a gunman unleashed a heavy barrage into the crowd. 30-year-old James McCoy, known as Juicy or Juice, repping 8 Trey, was struck in the chest as the bullets tore through the air. Juicy was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center in critical condition, but he could not survive the hit and was later pronounced dead. The drive-by didn't just claim Juice. 3 other men, aged 32, 39, and 41, were also struck in the hail of lead, suffering wounds to the chest, buttocks, and ankle, despite police having been called to the location twice earlier that night for noise complaints. The shooters managed to strike at the peak of the party and vanish into the night. No one is in custody, and the 8 Trey circle is left to mourn a veteran lost in a high-profile mass shooting. December 17, 2015, Auburn, Gresham, Chicago. The afternoon quiet on the 8300 block of South Ada Street was shattered at 4:30 p.m. when the cycle of violence claimed a second generation. 21-year-old Christopher Keys Jr., known as Chief Beefy or Meathead, repping 8 Trey, was found unresponsive inside a vehicle, his body riddled with gunshot wounds. He was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead at 5:15 p.m. In a haunting parallel, Chief Beefy met his end at the exact same age as his father, Lupe, who was killed by police 22 years earlier. The shooter vanished from the residential block before the first sirens reached the scene, leaving a family to mourn a father and son whose stories both ended at 21. No arrests have been made, and the shooters remain in the wind as Area South detectives hunt for leads. April 2nd, 2017, Auburn, Gresham, Chicago. The midday quiet on the 8200 block of South Ada Street was shattered at 12:30 p.m. in a violent ambush. 20-year-old Courtney Lewis, known as Make a Mess or Munna, repping 8 Trey, was sitting inside a vehicle with 3 other companions when a gunman unleashed a barrage of shots at the car. In a desperate attempt to escape, the driver hit the gas and sped away from the scene, but the damage was already done. 2 of the passengers realized they had been struck as the car reached the 8400 block of South Aberdeen. Munna had been hit twice in the back. He was rushed to Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but he was pronounced dead at 1:15 p.m. A 19-year-old companion was also struck in the back and left in critical condition. The hit went down in the heart of Foster Park territory, a neighborhood where the lines are drawn deep. Unlike many street hits, this one saw a swift breakthrough. Curtis Connor was later identified and arrested for the murder. The loss of Munna left the 8 Trey circle to mourn a young member taken in a high-stakes drive-by. May 9th, 2017, Pill Hill, Chicago. The quiet of the 9200 block of South Chapel Avenue was shattered just after 10 p.m. by the clinical sound of a revolver. 34-year-old Jesse Woods III, known as Jay Murder, repping 8 Trey, was walking near Joseph Warren Elementary School when the night turned lethal. A witness reported hearing a single shot followed by a brief silence, then a rapid succession of gunfire. When neighbors ran outside, they found Jay Murda lying on a front lawn, struggling for his final breaths after being targeted in a close-range execution. He had been struck several times with fatal wounds to his head and back. Responding officers pronounced him dead at the scene at 10:30 p.m. Before the shots rang out, a suspicious individual in dark clothing was seen lingering in the shadows, pretending to use a phone, a silent predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Jay Murda, who lived miles away on Carpenter Street, was caught far from his home base in a neighborhood once known for its peace. The shooter vanished into the darkness of the far south side, leaving behind no shell casings and no witnesses. No arrests have been made, and Jay Murda's death adds to the grim history of a block that has seen violence creeping into its sanctuary. July 6, 2017, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The evening sun offered no protection on the 8200 block of South Carpenter Street. When the violence hit home, around 6:10 p.m., 30-year-old Jonathan Halbert, known to the streets as Gotti or John, repping 8 Tray, was standing in his own driveway, just steps from his front door. In a scene of absolute recklessness, 2 gunmen emerged from a nearby alley and opened fire while children were playing just yards away. John was struck multiple times in the shoulders and legs in what family members believe was a case of mistaken identity or a stray hit meant for someone else. He was rushed to Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead at 6:59 p.m. A father and a graduate of Carver High, John was engaged to be married before his life was stolen on the very pavement he called home. The shooters retreated into the same alley they came from and vanished, leaving behind a neighborhood in shock and a set mourning a veteran. No suspects are in custody as Area South detectives continue to search for the 2 gunmen. October 19, 2017, Ford Heights, Illinois. The night took a lethal turn in the south suburbs as the violence of the streets reached the intersection of 15th and Lexington. Around 10 p.m., 18-year-old Shaka Bills, known as CJ, repping Monoworld, 8 Tray, and TMG, was targeted in a sudden attack. CJ was struck in the back by gunfire and was rushed to St. James Hospital in Chicago Heights in a desperate attempt to save his life. Despite the efforts of the medical staff, he was pronounced dead at 10:44 p.m. At just 18 years old, CJ became another young life claimed by the ongoing friction that connects the city to the surrounding suburbs. The shooter managed to escape into the Ford Heights night before the Cook County Sheriff's Office could secure the scene. No suspects are in custody, and the motive behind the targeted hit remains under investigation. April 7th, 2020, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The night air on the 8000 block of South Carpenter Avenue turned deadly at approximately 8:30 p.m. Officers responding to the echoes of gunfire attempted to pull over a vehicle, sparking a brief pursuit that ended when the car came to a sudden halt. 2 individuals inside the vehicle immediately bailed, disappearing into the shadows of the south side streets. But the true tragedy was left behind in the front seat. 18-year-old Morris Jones, known as AJ, repping 8 Tray, was found unresponsive with a catastrophic gunshot wound to the head. He was pronounced dead right there at the scene. At just 18 years old, AJ's life was cut short in a chaotic sequence that left investigators with more questions than answers. While his companions managed to evade the law, AJ became another name on the list of young lives lost in the heart of the block. No arrests have been made, and the shooters remain in the wind as Area South detectives hunt for the individuals who fled the car. May 4th, 2020, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The evening quiet on the 8500 block of South Sangamon Street was shattered by a drive-by attack at approximately 9:30 p.m. 21-year-old Damian Howard Jr., known as Blizz repping 8 Tray, was standing on a porch with a companion when a vehicle pulled up and an occupant unleashed a hail of gunfire. Blizz was struck in the head and neck in the targeted ambush. He was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but the injuries were unsurvivable and he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. A 22-year-old man standing with him was lucky to escape with only a graze wound to the chest and was listed in good condition. The shooter sped away from the residential block immediately following the gunfire and remains at large. The loss of Blizz is a significant blow to the 8-tray circle, occurring during a violent stretch for the neighborhood. No suspects are currently in custody, and Area 2 detectives are leading the homicide investigation. August 5th, 2020, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The night air at a gas station on the 8200 block of South Halstead Street turned lethal at approximately 9:15 p.m. 33-year-old Mark Ive Mack, known as Mr. 24 Keys, repping 8-tray, was standing outside when a dark-colored minivan cut through the darkness. An occupant from the vehicle unleashed a barrage of shots, sending bystanders scattering for cover. In a desperate attempt to survive, Keys ran into the gas station and collapsed on the floor. While police initially thought he hadn't been hit, he had sustained a fatal gunshot wound to his arm. He was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but he did not survive the night. A 28-year-old woman was also grazed in the thigh during the attack and was listed in good condition. The minivan sped away from the scene immediately, leaving behind a neighborhood in shock and a set mourning a veteran, while some in the streets linked the hit to ongoing friction with 800. The shooters officially remain in the wind. No arrests have been made, and Area 2 detectives are continuing the investigation. April 17th, 2022, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The pre-dawn hours on the 8400 block of South Aberdeen Street became the final stage for a high-profile figure in the drill scene. Around 2:20 a.m., 27-year-old Tyrone Pittman, known to the world as Johnny Made Cash, a prominent rapper repping 8-tray and the brother of legendary producer Young Chop, was involved in a violent domestic altercation that took a lethal turn. Authorities and ShotSpotter alerts reported a barrage of gunfire outside a bungalow-style home. Johnny Made Cash was struck in the thigh during the confrontation and was transported by a friend to Little Company of Mary Medical Center in Evergreen Park, where he was later pronounced dead. Unlike a typical street hit, the shooter was identified as his 28-year-old girlfriend, Brianna Gibbs. In a case that gripped the city's media, prosecutors revealed a history of domestic turbulence, including viral footage of Pittman allegedly assaulting Gibbs months prior. On the night of the shooting, Gibbs claimed Pittman had beaten her and pulled out a chunk of her hair before she retrieved a firearm and opened fire as he approached her on the porch. She was arrested 6 hours later in Bronzeville and charged with murder, though her defense maintained the shooting was a clear act of self-defense. The loss of Johnny Made Cash sent shockwaves through the 8-tray circle and the global drill community, marking a tragic end for a veteran artist whose life was cut short not by a rival set but by a domestic conflict that turned into a deadly stand. July 30th, 2022, Logan Square, Chicago. The early morning hours on the 1800 block of North Milwaukee Avenue was shattered by a targeted ambush at approximately 1:40 a.m. 31-year-old Eric Nolan, known as Eric repping 8-tray, was standing near the sidewalk in the trendy Logan Square neighborhood when a vehicle pulled alongside him. Without warning, an occupant inside produced a firearm and unleashed a barrage of shots. Eric was struck in the chest and collapsed as the vehicle sped away into the night. He was rushed to Illinois Masonic Medical Center in a desperate attempt to save his life, but the wound proved fatal and he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Despite the high visibility location, the shooters managed to vanish before police could seal off the area. The loss of Eric marks another veteran member of the 8-tray circle, taken out far from his primary South Side territory. No arrests have been made, and the shooters remain in the wind as Area 5 detectives search for surveillance footage of the vehicle involved. August 4th, 2022, Roseland, Chicago. The evening air on the 100 and 400 block of South Emerald Avenue was shattered by a brutal and calculated execution around 8 p.m. 35-year-old James Walter, known as Lil James, repping 8-tray in Buff City, was sitting in a parked car with a 33-year-old woman when a dark sedan pulled alongside them. An occupant from the sedan unleashed a heavy barrage of gunfire, striking Lil James multiple times in the torso and arm. He was rushed to Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but the damage was done and he was pronounced dead. The woman was left in serious condition with wounds to her abdomen and arm, while the initial police report painted a scene of a drive-by. The word on the street whispered a much darker story of a backdoor setup. Street accounts suggest Lil James was lured to the location via a ride-share app by individuals he thought were allies. Once he arrived, he was reportedly ambushed, struck with a baseball bat, and kidnapped before being taken to an alleyway where the assailants unleashed an overkill of 13 shots, targeting him from his face to his chest. This high-profile loss of a veteran figure has left the 8-Tray and Buff City circles reeling from the cold-blooded nature of the hit. The shooters vanished into the Roseland night, and no one is currently in custody as Area 2 detectives piece together the final moments of Lil James. April 12, 2023, Auburn Gresham, Chicago. The afternoon quiet on the 1000 block of West 86th Street was shattered by another targeted hit in the heart of the South Side. Around midday, 29-year-old Sean Turner, known to the streets as Sean Stone, repping 8-Tray, was caught in a deadly encounter that left him unresponsive. Details from the scene remain tight, but the result was a familiar tragedy for the block. Sean Stone was struck by gunfire and pronounced dead, marking a heavy loss for the 8-Tray circle as another veteran was taken off the board. The shooter managed to vanish from the residential stretch before the first sirens could echo through the neighborhood, leaving behind only spent shell casings and a family in mourning. No arrests have been made, and the motive remains a mystery as Area South detectives continue to search for leads in the broad daylight execution. May 13, 2023, Greater Grand Crossing, Chicago. The Saturday night energy on the 6400 block of South King Drive took a lethal turn when gunfire erupted in one of the city's most volatile corridors. Around 10 p.m., 17-year-old Clarence Bolden, known as Lil Bam, repping 8-Tray, was standing outside with a 16-year-old companion when the shadows turned violent. In a sudden ambush within the heart of O Block territory, Lil Bam was struck in the chest by a barrage of gunfire. He was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but the wound was too severe for the young teen to overcome, and he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The 16-year-old was lucky to escape with a wound to his arm and was listed in good condition. The loss of Lil Bam marks the second significant hit for the 8-Tray circle in 2023, claiming a young life in a territory where the rivalries are ancient and the margins for survival are razor thin. The shooters vanished into the Parkway Gardens complex before a perimeter could be established, and no arrests have been made as Area 1 detectives continue their search for the gunman. September 24, 2023, Englewood, Chicago. The Sunday morning quiet on the 5500 block of South Union Avenue was violently interrupted at 10:35 a.m. in a brazen daylight ambush. 24-year-old Kentrell Williams, known as Lil Top or Trap, repping 8-Tray, was sitting inside a parked vehicle when the street turned lethal. A gray vehicle pulled alongside him, and two suspects emerged with cold intent, unleashing a heavy barrage of gunfire. Trap was struck multiple times across his body, the sheer volume of shots leaving him no chance of survival. He was pronounced dead right there at the scene, marking another veteran loss for the 8-Tray circle in the heart of Englewood. The two gunmen retreated to the gray vehicle and sped away, disappearing into the neighborhood before the first units could arrive. No one is in custody, and the shooters remains in the wind as Area 1 detectives search for the vehicle involved in the clinical execution.